The moment the cage door slammed open, chaos exploded. A furious German shepherd burst free from the police K9 yard, eyes blazing, jaws tight, charging straight toward an elderly man standing alone in the park. Handlers shouted, sirens wailed, and officers sprinted after a massive German shepherd racing through the open gate. But this wasn't just any dog. This was Rex, the most disciplined K9 on the force. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't following orders. He was running towards something. Down the road, an elderly man paused mid-step, his cane tapping the wet pavement. When he looked up, he saw the roaring form of the dog hurtling straight toward him. The crowd screamed. Officers raised tranquilizers. Yet the old man didn't move. Then, in one heart-stopping instant, everything changed. Stay till the end. This story will move you. The sun hung low over the quiet suburban town, painting the sidewalks in soft gold. Children laughed near the park fountain, chasing bubbles that sparkled in the light. A group of joggers passed by, their cheerful voices blending with the hum of distant traffic. Everything felt peaceful, ordinary. At the far end of the walkway, an elderly man named Mr. Harris shuffled slowly forward, his cane tapping in a steady rhythm. Every afternoon, he followed this same path, a habit that had become his silent ritual since his wife passed away years ago. To him, this walk was more than exercise. It was his way of feeling alive. Across the street, behind tall chain-link fences, a different kind of routine was taking place. Police trainers barked commands, and powerful German shepherds obeyed with precision: sit, heel, attack, retreat. Among them was one dog that stood out, Rex, a massive, scar-faced shepherd with eyes sharp as amber glass. He moved with the confidence of a soldier, yet there was something restless in his demeanor. Rex's handler, Officer Lane, noticed the tension. "Easy, boy," he muttered, gripping the leash tighter. But Rex's gaze wasn't on his trainer. It was fixed somewhere beyond the fence. His ears twitched, his tail stiffened, and a low growl rumbled deep in his throat. Mr. Harris paused by the park bench, unaware that those piercing eyes were locked on him. As a soft breeze rustled through the trees, he smiled faintly at a group of children running past, completely oblivious to the storm about to break the calm of that golden afternoon. Everything looked normal. But in the heart of that loyal dog, something had already awakened. The next round of police K9 training began with whistles and firm commands. Officers lined up along the track, their dogs alert and disciplined. But one dog broke the rhythm. Rex refused to sit. His muscles were tense, his chest heaved with short breaths, and his eyes darted toward the far side of the training yard. Officer Lane frowned, tugging at the leash. "Rex, sit," he ordered sharply. The other dogs froze in perfect obedience, but Rex's body remained rigid, his gaze locked beyond the chain-link fence. He let out a sharp bark that echoed across the yard, startling even the trainers. "Something spooking him," muttered one of the officers. Lane shook his head. "He's been acting strange all morning." The man's voice carried a hint of frustration, but also unease. Rex was the department's most reliable K9, fearless, focused, almost machine-like in precision. Yet now he looked distracted. The German shepherd's ears twitched again. He sniffed the air, growling low, every instinct on high alert. Lane followed his line of sight, toward the park, where an old man was sitting quietly on a bench. Nothing unusual, but Rex's behavior only grew worse. He tugged violently at the leash, snarling, muscles straining as if something beyond the fence was calling him. "Rex, heel." Lane commanded again, pulling hard, but the dog refused. The sudden defiance drew murmurs from the other trainers. "Never seen him like this," one whispered. Then, out of nowhere, Rex barked. Once, deep and powerful, a sound that silenced the entire field. His paws scraped against the ground, ready to launch forward. Lane stepped back instinctively, feeling the raw force of his K9 partner trembling under the leash. Something in Rex's instincts had taken over, and though no one yet understood why, it was clear he wasn't just misbehaving, he was remembering. The sound cut through the chatter of officers and the barking of dogs like a thunderclap. For a moment, everyone froze. Then chaos erupted. "Gates open! Gates open!" A trainer shouted, but it was already too late. Rex had lunged forward, the leash slipping from Officer Lane's hands with brutal force. Dust flew beneath his paws as he bolted across the yard, eyes blazing with wild determination. "Stop him!" Lane roared, sprinting after him. Two other officers rushed toward the open gate, but Rex was a blur of motion, too fast, too strong. The heavy metal gate swung on its hinges as he burst into the open street. His bark tore through the calm afternoon like a siren. Pedestrians gasped and scattered as the massive German shepherd stormed down the walkway. Children screamed, mothers pulled their kids close, and even passing drivers slammed on their brakes. "Is that a police dog?" Someone yelled. "He's loose." Officer Lane and two others chased behind, shouting commands that went unheard. "Rex, sit, stay." But Rex didn't listen. His focus was absolute, his eyes locked on something ahead, something none of them could see. Up ahead. Mr. Harris turned at the commotion, squinting as he saw the crowd parting and the enormous dog barreling toward him. For an instant, he froze, not out of fear, but disbelief. The sight of the dog triggered something deep in his memory, something from a lifetime ago. The officers drew closer, raising tranquilizer guns. "Clear the area," one barked. Panic rippled through the park as people fled in all directions. But amid the chaos, Mr. Harris simply stood there, gripping his cane, and Rex, snarling, panting, unstoppable, was coming straight for him. The peaceful afternoon had shattered. What had begun as a routine day in the park was now a heart-stopping moment between a man who refused to run and a dog chasing ghosts from his past. The world around Mr. Harris blurred into chaos. Shouts, footsteps, the rush of terrified people fleeing. But the old man didn't move. His cane trembled slightly in his grip, yet his eyes never left the oncoming dog. He'd faced fear before, on battlefields far from home, and he recognized that same raw intensity now burning in the animal's gaze. "Sir, move," an officer screamed. "Get out of the way." But Mr. Harris stood firm. For reasons he couldn't explain, something inside him whispered that running would be wrong. There was a connection, an invisible thread, that told him this creature wasn't charging out of hatred. Something deeper drove it. The crowd watched in horror as the massive German shepherd lunged forward, muscles coiled, teeth bared, eyes locked on the fragile figure of the old man. A mother covered her child's eyes. Someone screamed, at the very last moment. Just as the officers raised their tranquilizer rifles, Mr. Harris did something no one expected. He raised his hand, not in defense, but in calm command. "Easy, boy," he said softly, his voice steady but gentle, carrying across the tense silence that had suddenly fallen. Rex skidded to a stop mere feet away, claws scraping against the concrete. His growl faltered. His body trembled, not from aggression but from confusion. The officers froze, afraid to move, afraid to shoot. The old man's eyes softened. "That's it," he murmured. "You're not angry, are you? You're scared." The dog stood rigid, chest heaving, teeth still bared, but his growl turned into a low whine. And in that breathless space between fear and recognition, the world watched a miracle unfold. The beast didn't strike, that he bowed his head. The old man hadn't just refused to run. He had reached the heart of something everyone else had missed. A cry for recognition from a loyal soul long lost. For a moment, no one dared breathe. The distance between man and beast was barely an arm's length, yet it felt like the entire world balanced on that fragile space. The officers stood frozen, fingers on their triggers, eyes darting between Rex's bared teeth and the old man's calm, unwavering face. "Stand down," shouted Captain Jensen from across the lot. But even he hesitated. Something about the scene didn't feel hostile. It felt haunted. Rex's chest rose and fell in rapid bursts. His hackles remained raised, but his eyes had changed. Gone was the savage fire of an attacked dog. In its place flickered confusion, pain, and something achingly familiar, recognition. He circled slowly, tail stiff, sniffing the air around Mr. Harris as if searching for a scent buried deep in memory. Harris didn't flinch. "It's all right, boy," he said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." His voice, rough and low, carried a weight that made the young officers glance at each other. The man wasn't pleading. He was commanding, the way only someone with years of quiet authority could. Officer Lane took a cautious step forward, whispering, "Sir, please step back." He could still attack. But Mr. Harris didn't move. His hand trembled slightly as he extended it toward the trembling dog. "You're not lost," he murmured. "You remember me, don't you?" Rex's ears flicked. The tension in his body shifted, his growl fading into a soft whine. The watching officers lowered their rifles a fraction, uncertain but captivated. It wasn't a man facing a beast anymore. That it was a reunion struggling to surface through fear, years, and silence, and deep inside Rex's amber eyes. Something old was beginning to wake. Rex's body trembled. Muscles taut as he circled the old man once more. His ears flicked back, then forward, tail twitching uncertainly. The officers held their breath, afraid to interfere. Every movement from the dog seemed deliberate, cautious, emotional, as if he was struggling to piece together a memory buried deep inside him. Harris slowly lowered himself to one knee, ignoring the stiffness in his joints. His cane clattered softly against the ground, but he didn't care. His voice came out low, steady, filled with quiet pain. "You remember me, don't you?" he whispered. "Shadow." The name slipped through the air like a ghost. Rex froze mid-step. His ears perked, eyes snapping toward the old man. For a heartbeat, the dog didn't move. Then a soft whimper escaped his throat. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Gasps rippled through the gathered crowd. Officer Lane exchanged a confused look with Captain Jensen. "Shadow," he muttered. "Who's Shadow?" Mr. Harris's eyes glistened. "That's what I called him. Years ago," he said. "Back when he was my partner." He reached out a trembling hand. "Come here, boy." Rex hesitated, his body shivering with emotion. His head lowered, ears folding back, and slowly, hesitantly, he stepped forward. The moment his nose brushed against Mr. Harris's hand, the old man exhaled sharply, tears breaking free. "It's you," he whispered. "It's really you." The crowd fell silent. Officers who'd been ready to fire stood motionless, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Rex pressed his head against the man's chest, whining softly, tail moving for the first time. The tension in his body melted into relief. He remembered the voice that once called him home, the scent of the soldier who had stood beside him through fire and chaos. Harris closed his eyes, hand buried in the thick fur of his long-lost friend. "You found me," he murmured, and in that instant, the raging police dog was gone. In his place stood Shadow, the loyal war dog, who had finally come home. The world around Mr. Harris faded, as his mind slipped back in time, back to a place far from the peaceful park and the trembling dog before him. The sounds of traffic vanished, replaced by the roar of helicopters, the whistle of bullets, and the desperate shouts of soldiers. He could almost smell the smoke, the heat, the burning metal. Years ago, he wasn't Mr. Harris, the quiet man with a cane. He was Sergeant William Harris, serving overseas in a dusty war zone. His partner back then wasn't human. It was a German shepherd named Shadow. Together, they'd cleared enemy bunkers, found survivors, and saved lives. Shadow wasn't just a K9. He was a brother in arms. One night, during an ambush, their convoy was hit. Fire and chaos tore through the camp. Harris remembered the explosion, the deafening blast that threw him to the ground. When he came to, his leg was shattered and Shadow was gone. He'd searched through the rubble, calling his name again and again, but the only answer was silence. They told him the dog didn't make it. He was buried among the fallen. Now, decades later, that same loyal spirit stood before him. Harris's throat tightened as he stared at Rex. No, at Shadow, alive, breathing. Reeled, he brushed a trembling hand across the shepherd's face. Feeling the faint scar near his ear, the same one from that night in the desert, tears welled in his eyes. "They said you were gone," he whispered. "But you never were you?" Rex looked up, eyes soft, and let out a low, mournful whine. In that sound, Harris heard years of waiting, of separation, of a bond that not even time or death could break. The reunion between the old man and the dog left the training field in stunned silence. Officers exchanged uncertain glances, whispering to one another as Rex, now calmer, sat beside Mr. Harris like a soldier at rest. The once ferocious K9 now seemed transformed, obedient only to the elderly stranger who had called him Shadow. Captain Jensen stepped forward carefully. "Sir, I need to understand what's happening here," he said, his voice steady but cautious. "That dog, Rex, Belongs to the department. He's one of our best trained K9s. How could he possibly be yours? Mr. Harris didn't look away from the dog. His wrinkled hand rested gently on Rex's neck. Because before he was yours, he said softly, he was mine. The captain frowned. That's impossible. We got Rex from a rescue program 3 years ago. He was found injured near a military facility. No tags, no chip record, nothing. Just a scar and a temperament fit for the job. Mr. Harris's gaze flickered toward that very scar near Rex's ear. I know that wound, he murmured. I patched it myself the night we were ambushed overseas. You see that mark on his leg? I tied that bandage with my own hands. His voice cracked, heavy with emotion. I thought he died that night. Officer Lane shook his head in disbelief. So you're saying this dog survived a war zone, disappeared for years, and ended up here? Harris nodded slowly. Stranger things have happened, son. But look at him. He knows me. You can't train that kind of recognition. Rex shifted closer, pressing his body protectively against Harris's leg, eyes calm but alert. Captain Jensen exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. Dogs don't just remember decades later. But deep down, watching the gentle way Rex leaned into the old man's hand, even he couldn't deny it. Something beyond logic was unfolding that it wasn't coincidence. It was connection, one forged in battle, tested by time, and now reborn under the unlikeliest sky. The afternoon sun dipped lower, painting everything in warm, golden light. The chaos had melted into quiet awe. Officers stood in a semicircle, their radios silent, their commands forgotten. In the center of it all sat Mr. Harris and Rex, no longer strangers, but two souls rediscovering each other after years apart. Rex had stopped trembling. His breathing steadied. His ears perked as Mr. Harris spoke softly to him, his hand stroking the familiar patch of fur behind the ear. You always liked that, didn't you? The old man murmured. The dog's eyes softened, tail thumping faintly against the ground. Every small gesture, every sound of that voice, unlocked another buried memory. Sir, Captain Jensen said quietly, stepping closer. We need to take him back to the station. He's still department property. Regulations don't understand loyalty. Harris interrupted gently, not with anger, but with calm conviction. He didn't look up as he spoke. You think he's just a tool, a weapon on 4 legs. But to me, he was family. Rex lifted his head, eyes locked on the man's face. Then, slowly, he leaned forward and rested his muzzle against Harris's chest, releasing a soft, contented sigh. The crowd's collective breath caught in their throats. Even the captain hesitated, lowering his clipboard. Lane whispered, He's not doing that for anyone else, sir. Mr. Harris smiled faintly. He knows I never stopped waiting for him. In that stillness, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition deeper than words. Years of separation, pain, and loss seemed to fade. All that remained was trust that a gentle breeze stirred the dust, carrying the faint echo of children's laughter from the park. And for the first time since his escape, Rex looked truly at peace that he wasn't a rogue police dog anymore. He was a soldier reunited with his commander, heart, soul, and purpose restored. Captain Jensen crouched beside Rex, his brow furrowed as he examined the dog closely. The crowd had thinned, but a few onlookers lingered, their phones forgotten, unable to look away from the quiet miracle unfolding before them. You said he has a scar? Jensen asked softly. Mr. Harris nodded and pointed to Rex's hind leg. Right there, just above the joint. He got that wound in the field. A piece of shrapnel hit him when he pushed me out of an explosion's path. His voice trembled, not from age, but from the weight of memory. I used my torn sleeve to wrap it. Jensen squinted, brushing his hand over the thick fur. His eyes widened when he felt it. An old, healed scar, long and narrow, exactly where Harris had said. He glanced up, disbelief flickering in his eyes. That's impossible. Not impossible, Harris replied quietly. Just fate. Rex's tail moved slightly, as if affirming the truth himself. The dog nudged the old man's hand, whining softly, eyes shining with warmth and longing. Officer Lane stepped closer, his voice hushed. You can't fake something like that, sir. No dog reacts like this without history. The others nodded silently. Even Captain Jensen's stern expression began to soften. He looked at the pair, the aging veteran and his scarred companion, and saw something no regulation or report could explain. For a long moment, no one spoke. The sun dipped lower, turning the world golden and still. Mr. Harris smiled faintly through glassy eyes. "You saved me once, boy," he whispered. "Seems you've done it again." And as Rex pressed closer, resting his head on the man's knee, every doubt around them melted away, replaced by quiet, undeniable truth. Captain Jensen stood in silence, his jaw tight, his thoughts tangled between duty and emotion. The scene before him didn't belong to logic, it belonged to something deeper. He'd seen soldiers break down, seen dogs die in service, but he had never seen a moment like this. A war veteran reunited with a dog the world had assumed long gone. Behind him, the younger officers whispered among themselves. "Sir, what do we do?" One asked hesitantly. "Do we take the dog back?" Jensen didn't answer immediately. He looked at Rex, now lying peacefully beside Mr. Harris, one paw resting against the man's shoe. The dog wasn't agitated anymore. His breathing was calm, his posture protective, like he had finally found home. "Protocol says the K9 belongs to the department," Jensen said slowly. "He's government property, trained and maintained with official resources." The words sounded cold, even to his own ears. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "But tell me, how do you enforce ownership over loyalty?" Officer Lane shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, if we take him, it'll break that old man's heart. And maybe the dog's too." Jensen's gaze hardened. He was a man of rules, but also a man who understood what it meant to lose a brother in arms. He'd lost his own partner years ago, a K9 named Thor, during a drug raid gone wrong. Watching Mr. Harris with Rex reopened wounds he'd buried, he turned toward the veteran. "Mr. Harris," he began quietly, "I don't know how this happened, and I can't explain it. But I can see what's in front of me." Harris looked up, eyes weary but calm. "You see what love remembers, Captain. That's all." For a long, heavy pause, Jensen said nothing. Then, almost under his breath, he murmured, "Sometimes the heart outranks the handbook." And though he didn't yet say it aloud, everyone sensed it. Something inside the captain had already decided. The golden light of afternoon dimmed as clouds rolled in from the west, turning the sky a deep, bruised gray. A chill swept through the air, stirring leaves and dust around the training yard. It was as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Captain Jensen stared out over the field, lost in thought, the wind tugging at his uniform. But Rex's ears suddenly twitched. His body stiffened, head snapping toward the tree line beyond the fence. A low growl rumbled in his chest, quiet, but sharp enough to silence everyone nearby. Mr. Harris looked down at him, puzzled. "What is it, boy?" Jensen's instincts kicked in immediately. "Something's wrong," he muttered. He raised a hand, signaling the other officers to spread out. Rain began to patter softly against the pavement, the scent of wet earth mixing with tension. Rex growled louder now, muscles coiling beneath his thick fur. His eyes darted toward the maintenance shed on the far end of the lot. A faint noise echoed, metal shifting, footsteps crunching where no one should be. "Hold your positions," Jensen ordered, voice cutting through the wind. Lane drew his weapon, scanning the shadows. Suddenly, lightning split the sky, illuminating a figure darting behind the shed, someone running. "Hey!" Lane shouted. "Stop right there." Rex barked furiously, tugging at his leash, straining with primal urgency. The officers broke into a sprint, splashing through puddles as thunder cracked overhead. Mr. Harris, gripping his cane, could only watch as the chaos reignited. The peaceful reunion was gone, replaced by danger. Raw and real, and deep inside, Rex knew before anyone else. The real threat hadn't passed. That IT was hiding in the storm, waiting to strike. The storm raged in full now, lightning flashing, thunder shaking the ground. Rain poured in sheets, soaking everything in seconds. Officers fanned out through the yard, their radios crackling, their voices lost in the roar of wind. But Rex didn't wait for orders. His instincts had taken over. With a powerful bark, he lunged forward, tearing free from Lane's grip. The leash snapped like thread. "Rex!" "No!" Lane shouted, but the German shepherd was already sprinting through the mud. His focus locked on the figure fleeing behind the maintenance shed. The shadowy man glanced back once, eyes wild, clutching a knife in one hand. He had been hiding there, an escaped suspect from earlier that morning's training exercise. No one knew he'd slipped back into the compound during the chaos.mr. Harris shouted, "Watch out," as the man turned sharply and came charging, not at the officers, but directly toward the old veteran himself. The knife glinted under the lightning. Time slowed. Rex moved like a bullet. His paws struck the ground with thunderous rhythm, water splashing in every direction. Just as the attacker lunged, Rex leapt, his body a blur of fur and power, slamming into the man's chest. Both crashed to the ground in a violent struggle. The knife skittered across the pavement, clattering to a stop inches from Harris's cane. "Hold him!" Captain Jensen yelled, rushing forward with 2 officers. They wrestled the suspect down, handcuffing him as Rex stood over the man, teeth bared but eyes sharp and controlled. He didn't maul, he protected.mr. Harris stared in disbelief, his heart pounding. Rex turned to him, breathing heavily, drenched and trembling. The old man reached out, his voice breaking. "You saved me." Again, lightning flashed, illuminating the moment. The hero dog standing guard, the old soldier behind him, both framed by rain and memory. Rex wasn't just remembering the past anymore. He was reliving it, proving that loyalty never dies, even when fate gives it a second chance to be. By the time the rain began to ease, the suspect was in custody, and the chaos had melted into quiet relief. Officers stood drenched and exhausted, watching as Rex sat protectively beside Mr. Harris once more. The old man's hand rested gently on the dog's soaked fur, his eyes full of pride and disbelief. Captain Jensen approached, his boots splashing in shallow puddles. "He saved your life," he said softly. Harris looked up, a faint smile touching his weathered face. "He's been doing that since the day we met," he replied. Jensen nodded, glancing at Rex. "We ran his microchip," he said after a pause. "The ID code isn't from our database. It's from an old military registry. The file was declassified years ago." He handed Harris a laminated printout. The words still legible despite the damp. K9 Unit Shadow, deployed 2009. Status, missing in action.mr. Harris's eyes filled with tears. He traced the faded name with trembling fingers, whispering, "You came back to me, soldier." Rex wagged his tail once, then leaned in closer, resting his head on Harris's knee. The dog didn't understand the words, but he felt the emotion, the peace that came with being recognized at last. Captain Jensen exhaled slowly, lowering his cap. "Guess this wasn't just an escape," he said quietly. "It was a homecoming." The storm clouds parted then, sunlight spilling across the soaked training yard. The water shimmered like glass, reflecting man and dog. 2 survivors reunited by fate, for everyone watching. It wasn't just a story about a runaway K9. It was a reminder that loyalty never fades, and love, once forged in battle, always finds its way home. A week later, the police station's front doors opened to the soft creak of hinges. Mr. Harris stepped inside, leaning gently on his cane, his eyes scanning the familiar halls where Rex, now officially recognized as Shadow, had spent his final service years. The officers greeted him warmly, some with smiles, others with quiet nods of respect. Captain Jensen approached, holding a manila folder and a leash. "Mr. Harris," he said, voice steady but kind. "The department has reviewed everything. The records, the military chip, the service history. We've made our decision." He paused, then smiled. "Rex, or should I say Shadow, is officially retired from active duty, and the adoption papers are yours." For a long moment, the old veteran just stared, his eyes glistening. "Thank you," he whispered. "I never thought I'd get the chance to bring him home again." Jensen clipped off the police tag from the leash and handed it to him. "He's yours now, Sergeant. Always was, I think." When Shadow saw the old man kneel, he barked once, sharp, joyful, and bounded forward, tail wagging for the first time since that stormy day. Laughter rippled through the station. Even the hardest officers couldn't hide their smiles. Outside, the world was bright again. Mr. Harris walked slowly down the steps, Shadow trotting faithfully beside him, their shadows stretching long across the pavement. The dog nudged his master's hand, and Harris chuckled softly. "Come on, old friend," he said. "Let's go home." As they disappeared into the afternoon sun, the bond between them felt eternal. Proof that true loyalty doesn't fade with years, distance, or duty. It endures, quietly, until it finds its way back where it belongs. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of loyalty, courage, and second chances.